Jazz guitarist Chuck Loeb has died. He was 61. He was also one of the heavyweights in smooth jazz, contemporary jazz, and a guy who replaced Larry Carlton in Foreplay, a band that also had Lee Ritenour in there. You knew you got chops if you're replacing those big guns. He was also one of the nicest guys that I've ever interviewed. Since about 1989 to 2012, I programmed a lot of smooth jazz. And I remember one day, it's interesting, I was talking to Chuck on the phone, and it was just an interview. I didn't know him that well. And I was telling him how maybe 70% of the smooth jazz that I was playing was complete crap. I told him, I said, I don't like it. It's homogenized. And I asked him, can I be frank with you? And his answer, because he listened intently, he said, well, you got 30% of great music there, huh? That's pretty good news. And just his fresh spin on that simple little argument of a frustrated programmer in smooth jazz going, well, I don't like this stuff anymore. He looked at the positive side. And notice, if you're watching this video, you know his music. There was something incredibly positive about the sounds that he came up with. I remember meeting Dave Weckl a few years ago, who was at a drumming clinic. My son was at one of his intensive drumming clinics, and I asked him about Chuck Loeb. And he said, Chuck always knew where to put his fingers. He said, not everyone can do that, as simple as that might sound. It ain't simple. I interviewed Chuck Loeb 4 different times, but that first experience is when we really got into the meat of it. He talked about his love for classic rock and Led Zeppelin and Bob Dylan and all the stuff that we know as classic rock these days. He was 11, I think, the summer of 67 and the summer of love. But, I mean, he was just flourishing and loving this music. But quickly after that, he discovered jazz. He ended up playing with Stan Getz. He was in Steps Ahead with Michael Brecker, who we lost a few years ago as well. But it was always his music that made an awful lot of difference for me. As I mentioned earlier, there was always something very positive. It made you feel good. It lifted you up. When I was complaining about the smooth jazz that I didn't like, it was just the heavily funk-oriented stuff that didn't really have great melody. And I'd be remiss not to mention the fact that Chuck Loeb was a powerhouse producer who had produced some of the biggest names, not only in smooth jazz, but in jazz. But, you know, he was a stickler. He liked things done the right way, but he was an amazing guy to work with. I always heard positive feedback about Chuck Loeb and how much of a nice guy he was. And 61 is way too early to lose such an amazing man. I'll say it again, one of the nicest human beings I've ever interviewed in my life. May he rest in peace. Please leave your comments, subscribe to our channel, and share our videos. We'd appreciate that. Chuck, see you on the other side. Take good care of yourself.